Hi everyone, I'm Gautam VK, the Seeker of Wisdom. I'm a manifestation coach, and in this video, we're going to be talking about why you are struggling to manifest as well as states. Now, before I do so, I'd like to remind you guys I am available for coaching, so I offer one-on-ones, masterclasses, as well as courses. I also have a free Facebook group and a paid Facebook group, and last but not least, I also have a mailing list where I post articles from time to time as well as my latest offers for coaching. So if you guys need any information on any of those things that I mentioned, feel free to email me or DM me for more information, and I'll be happy to guide you guys on those. And without further ado, guys, let's get to it. So what prompted this video was a couple client conversations that I've been having the past week, as well as me listening to Neville Goddard's Justified States. So if you guys have not listened to that lecture, I highly recommend that you guys do so, because there's always great insights in those lectures, like Neville lectures as a whole. No matter how many times you listen to it, I always find myself like realizing that, okay, hey, I did not notice this before. And this has happened to me a couple times, like even though I have listened to a few lectures, like maybe say like 5 6 times already. And Justified States was one of those lectures for me, because there was this story where Neville spoke about him, manifesting his journey to Barbados from New York, that many of us are, well accustomed to. But there was one thing that Abdullah told Neville on his way to Barbados, something to the effect of, you will die, and like not physically, but his old self essentially dying. And by the time he comes back, he will not be the same person. So up till that point, Neville was a strict vegetarian for a while, and he hasn't drank alcohol, I believe, and whatnot. And that was how he was throughout his stay in Barbados as well. So nothing really changed in Barbados as well. But when he came back, like in his returning journey, I think it took about 10 days from Barbados to New York. I think they were traveling by boat. So when he came, in those 10 days, he did everything that he hasn't done in the last 7 years prior to that. So think about that. Like, he did not like eat meat, for example, he did not drink and whatnot. And all those things happened within those 10 days. Essentially, whatever that he did not do those 7 days, he did this, during those like 10 days, essentially. 7 years, sorry. And the moral that Neville was trying to preach was that when you are in a certain state, it's easier for you to do something. It's almost effortless for you, and you won't even think of it as like exerting some sort of effort or whatsoever, and you will just do it. It's so natural for you. And that right there to me was like the aha moment, that light bulb moment that clicked for me, that may not have been necessarily be the case in the past when I was listening to it. Like, I knew this story somewhere, but I didn't really pay attention to it. But I feel like this right here is the key for a lot of people, in the sense that when it comes to, let's say, SP, for example, many people tend to struggle because they are not in the end state of mind. Because if they were, a lot of things that they are trying to avoid would be easier. So let me explain what I'm saying. If, let's say, you're manifesting your SP and you're in the end state, let's, for the hypothetical reason, let's assume you are manifesting marriage with your SP. So you are now assuming that you are in a blissful relationship, marriage with your SP. So you see them as your husband, or you see them as your wife, right, wherever appropriate. So you see them as such. What that would mean is that you wouldn't be tempted to check their social media, you wouldn't be tempted to do things and whatnot. But if you are still in the state of trying to manifest them, those things are going to be difficult, because you're still seeing yourself as separate from your state where you are blissfully married to them. You are still seeing yourself as the person who is trying to manifest. So there's a separation. Like, that implies that there's not only a separation between you and your desires, but there's a separation between you and your SP. You don't see you and your SP as a married couple, for example. So what you end up doing is that you are struggling to avoid certain things that are natural to that state. So for example, let's say checking the 3D, for example, right? You wouldn't do it if you are married to your SP. But because, like, you are now in this state where you are trying to manifest them, this is very natural for you to do. So it's very natural for you to check the 3D and whatnot, because you are now in the state of trying to manifest them. Now what we ought to do is transition into the state of being married to them, right? And the same thing with the relationship. So this right here is the key, because the reason why you are struggling to avoid certain actions is due to the fact that you have not shifted into the ideal state yet. And as a result, certain actions are very easy for you. It's so second nature to you compared to other things that you would like to do. Say, for example, going to the gym. When you're in a certain mindset, going to the gym will be very easy for you to do so. Whereas if you are in a state where you're trying to go to the gym, where you're trying to do all these things, but you don't feel good enough, but you feel insecure and whatnot, when that state is natural for you, obviously the act of going to the gym, repels you. Whereas if you have shifted, if you have made that shift in your mind to this state where you're already this person who always goes to the gym, who works out, who's always fit and healthy and whatnot, going to the gym is second nature for you. And that's what we're trying to get to. So at this point, some of you may be wondering, but what is a state and how do I get to that state? A state is nothing more than a thought process, a bunch of thoughts cobbled up together. It's the way you would think. If you're an actor, you would be handed certain roles. Think of maybe, say, Chris Evans is a very good example of that. So funny story, when back in 2011, when Chris Evans played Captain America, I was very skeptical simply because I only remember Chris Evans. Like, I don't watch a lot of English movies like prior to that. So I only remember Chris Evans from like his role in Fantastic Four as the Human Torch, right? Johnny Storm. And if you remember, like in that role, he's a very comedic, goofy kind of guy, right? And that was the role that Johnny always plays. But one thing that like he did when he transitioned into the role of Captain America was that he was very bold, he was very assertive, he was very stoic almost, right? And that was the role that he took. And what he did was essentially just shifted into that state, basically. And his role was so convincing, I just fell in love with it immediately. But this is what I'm talking about. You're just shifting from a different role, essentially. Like think of a state, sorry, as a role. And that's how I would say it. It's just a bunch of thoughts. And when we hand a actor a script of like, okay, how this character does this and whatnot, like we often try to, what an actor does is that they often try to think, okay, what would this character do in XYZ scenarios? What would they try to do? And like great actors, they always try to get into that way of like, okay, get into how to think like that character. And like some people really take it far, like Heath Ledger, especially the actors who portrayed Joker. I think Jared Leto kind of isolated himself as well. He started to send like funny stuff to all the Suicide Squad like cast members at one point, because they were trying to get into that state of like this psychopath criminal who is very irrational and whatnot. And they did whatever they had to get into that state. Heath Ledger, I think like he locked himself up in a hotel room for a couple of days and he started to journal and whatnot. Like it was very intense kind of process for them to get into that state. But that's what it is. You're just stepping into a role. And if you have been through a lot of career shifts, you would understand this as well, in the sense that you would only see it as just a career. You wouldn't let that career define your state of mind. And whenever you do enter a specific career, for example, you would just go into that state of mind. So for example, like I think military is a great example for this. When a lot of guys who go from like reserve units, I'm not talking about active duty, I'm talking about reserve units. So reserve units, for context, are folks who have like civilian jobs. Some might be working as teachers, construction workers, doctors and whatnot, right? But when these reserve units are activated, they have to be deployed. And what these people will do is like and this happens all on a subconscious level, mind you, when they get deployed, their instincts just kicks back in. And what happens is that even without them realizing, they have shifted into a different state of mind. They have essentially changed their hats from whatever that they were doing in their civilian world to the military world. And that's what we are trying to do in manifesting as well, is that we are trying to shift into this state, aka just a thought process. We are just trying to change hats. We are trying to change roles, essentially, from what we were to what we want to be. And when we persist in that, when we maintain that, what happens is that we manifest our goals, because our 3D has to reflect based on what we are thinking right now. It has to reflect, it has to be in alignment to our thought process. And that's what we are trying to do. So if you are in a new state of mind consistently, right, that's the key, consistently, you will manifest whatever you want. And it will be as easy as you can possibly imagine. It will be so effortless for you, especially if you want to be in a committed relationship and whatnot, what I would say is that, okay, I am now in a committed relationship with my SP. How would I feel? What would I do differently? And I told this to one of my clients not too long ago as well. It's like, okay, you would go to the same, workplace. You would do pretty much the same things. You would do your dishes. You would brush your teeth. But there will be something that's slightly different there. Your demeanor will change. And I want you guys to capture that feeling, right? Knowing essentially is the key there, right? That knowing that, okay, I am now in a relationship with the love of my life and everything is perfect right now. And it's that knowing that we are trying to capture. And every time when you're visualizing or having an inner conversation, that's the knowing that we are trying to capture there. And this applies to money as well. I always use this analogy with my clients. So if you are my client, you would have heard of this. How would a beggar sleep, right, on the same street, knowing that he's going to be a millionaire tomorrow? Like, if he knew for a fact that he's going to hit the lottery and he's going to hit like $1 million, how would he sleep knowing that he's going to be a millionaire tomorrow? Mind you, nothing has changed for that night, right? He's still in the same street. He's still staring up into the same sky. He's probably wearing those same smelly clothes, for example. But what has changed? His mindset. That's what we are trying to capture, that knowing, right? That knowing and the mindset that results from that. That's what we are trying to capture. So we are trying to saturate our mind with all the techniques that we do to capture that knowing, and as a result, that mindset that comes, from that stems from that. So if you could do that, manifesting becomes easy for you. You wouldn't even feel like doing certain things anymore because you are now in the new state. So you wouldn't feel tempted to check the 3D. You wouldn't feel tempted to essentially do anything to manipulate the 3D to be in your favor. You wouldn't be probing your SP to get a favorable reply from them because you're already in a loving relationship with your SP in your mind. And when you come at it from that perspective, things will just come in, into your world like almost in an effortless fashion. And that's what we are trying to capture here, guys. It's a thought process. And every day I want you guys, if you're not accustomed to it, this is where you need to take a bit of effort to redirect your mind, to steer your mind to thinking this way. And you have to do effort here. This is where I would say a majority of the work is involved, but it's so worth it. So every day you have to steer your mind to, okay, how would I go about my day if I was already in a committed relationship with my SP? What would be different? And you have to start doing that. And if you would like to talk to them, do an inner conversation, because that's something that people always ask me. Well, if I was already in a committed relationship, if I was already in a marriage, there are certain things that I would do that I may not do now. I understand that. And that's where imagination comes into play, because remember, the subconscious mind is unable to tell apart what's real, aka the 3D that is, and what's in your mind, the imagination. It can't tell the difference, right? So use that to your advantage there. Use that to your advantage by immersing yourself in certain scenes. Use that to your advantage by having loving inner conversations with your SP throughout the day. So this way it makes it natural. Yes, you would be having conversations back and forth. And if you're in a no contact situation right now, I imagine, you might be having that struggle to get into that, like how to make the connection essentially. Okay, if I was already in a relationship, I would be talking to them, but I'm in no contact. How do I, bridge that gap? Inner conversations, imagination. These things are there for a reason, to bridge the gap essentially, to serve as the cushion until our manifestations comes into the 3D reality. That's the way I see it. So yeah, guys, that's about it. So if you guys have any questions on any of these things that I mentioned, feel free to email me or DM me via Instagram, or just put it down in the comment section and I'll get back to you guys as soon as I can. And we are still doing that giveaway for the 1111 subscribers. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel and follow me on Instagram at The Seeker of Wisdom, no spaces, and you guys are automatically entered into that giveaway where I give out one coaching call for one lucky person. And yeah, that's about it, guys. So thank you so much for all of your support. I really appreciate the love that I've been receiving from the community, just throughout this year. And I mentioned this in my previous video that I've yet to release, but happy summer for all of you. Go and enjoy the time with your loved ones and whatnot, because yeah, time flies and it's already June and I'm like, where did this time go, right? So enjoy and have a blast, and don't strain yourself. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be all right. Things are gonna go pan out in your favor. And yeah, I love you all. Stay safe and happy manifesting. Peace.